Good evening. My name is General Merrill A. McPeak, Tony McPeak. I've been retired for some years now, but for 37 years I was a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force and ended up being the Chief of Staff. Vietnam was my war, and it was a war for a lot of Americans because it lasted so long. And it was an unsuccessful war. But there were a lot of lessons we learned on the air side, and you're going to see some of them tonight. It was the first time we went against integrated air defenses that included surface-to-air missiles. And it was the time that we used a lot of swept-wing technology that was generated in the 50s and 60s, and we learned that we had to reduce our radar visibility, that we had to develop a class of precision-guided munitions, and so forth. All those were very important lessons learned, and you're going to see some of that tonight. Good luck and good flying.
These are the planes that won the Battle of Midway, that bombed the heart out of Hitler's Germany. The planes that fought the air war over the jungles of Indochina and the deserts of Iraq. These are the planes that define the meaning of air power. These are the legends of air combat.
The air war in Vietnam was unlike any other. It was the full might of the world's greatest military power pitted against an elusive but highly motivated enemy. From an air combat perspective, the Vietnam War provided the superpowers, the US and the USSR, with the opportunity to put their best technology and weapon systems into the sky to fight it out. The first test of air power in Southeast Asia was not in the skies over Vietnam, but over neighboring Laos. Operation Barrel Roll was one of the most closely held secrets and one of the most unknown components of the American military commitment in Southeast Asia. Due to the neutrality of Laos, guaranteed by the Geneva Conference of 1954 and 1962, both the U.S. and North Vietnam strove to maintain the secrecy of their operations and only slowly escalated military actions there. As much as both parties would have liked to have publicized their enemy's violation of the accords, both had more to gain by keeping their own roles quiet. The original purpose of the operation was to serve as a signal to the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, North Vietnam, to cease its support of the insurgency then taking place in the Republic of Vietnam, or South Vietnam. This action was taken within Laos due to the location of North Vietnam's expanding logistical corridor known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which ran from southwestern North Vietnam through southeastern Laos and into South Vietnam. The air campaign waged there centered on the interdiction of the logistical system for the NVA and Viet Cong fighting in South Vietnam. In addition, the mission of the U.S. Air Force was to seal off the southern Mekong River Valley, thus providing a buffer for Thailand, insulating the Vientiane government from direct communist threat, and drain Pavan manpower and resources. At the same time, the operation became increasingly involved in providing close air support missions for the Royal Lao Armed Forces, CIA-backed tribal mercenaries, and Thai volunteers in a covert ground war in northern and northeastern Laos. For the Americans, Laos became almost exclusively an air war, one which saw a reversal of the role it played in the conflict in neighboring South Vietnam. In Laos, the Air Force applied conventional air power in the support of an unconventional ground war. Although the People's Army of Vietnam could have fielded enough troops to conquer Laos at any point during the conflict, the Communists only sought to instigate a stalemate, one that would allow the trail system to operate unhindered by the Americans and Laotians. In 1959, the first infantry weapons were delivered to the Highlands Hmong tribe, and their training as an anti-communist field force was begun. 9 CIA specialists, 9 U.S. Army Special Forces personnel, and 99 Thai members of the Police Aerial Reconnaissance Unit participated in the training. This force became l'Armée clandestine, or the Secret Army. Shortly afterward, the CIA began Project Water Pump, a program to train Laotian, Thai, Hmong, and Air America air crews in flight and maintenance of U.S.-supplied AT-28 Trojan fighter bombers. The T-28 Trojan was the first U.S. fixed-wing attack aircraft lost in South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Captain Robert L. Simpson, United States Air Force, Detachment 2A, 1st Air Commando Group, and Lieutenant Waugh, SVNAF, were shot down by ground fire on August 28, 1962, while flying close air support. Neither crewman survived. Eventually, the Royal Laotian Air Force would consist of 5 wings of 10 aircraft each. Water Pump could never produce enough pilots, however, since graduation rates barely exceeded the death rates of graduates who simply flew until they died. The aircraft utilized to support the covert war were an odd assortment of vintage propeller-driven fighter bombers and high-performance jet aircraft like the F-100D Super Sabre.
Well, the F-100 was a sort of big F-86. The lessons that we had learned in Korea about the MiG being able to fly higher and faster, we tried to correct with the F-100 by taking an F-86, in some ways you can think about it this way, and putting an afterburner in the back of it. So an afterburner is a way of dumping fuel in the engine exhaust and getting it to reignite, and it will add typically something like 50% to the thrust. So the thrust of the engine, the J57 engine in the F-100 was about 10,000 pounds. And then you added another 5,000 pounds of thrust when you dumped fuel into the exhaust. And with that extra fuel, it was supersonic in level flight, okay, a first for an operational aircraft. The F-86 could get supersonic just barely in a dive, but the F-100, you could actually fly supersonic straight and level. As I say, the first operational aircraft that this was true of. So it was a difficult airplane to fly because it was not very stable. The first versions of the F-100, the F-100A, were pretty stable, but it had controllability problems that in some flight regimes simply went out of control. This was corrected by putting a bigger tail on it and some other modifications.
Though it had always had an accident rate higher than other types of jets during this time period, the Super Sabre had plenty of fans among pilots who flew it. The planes were responsive to the pilot's every touch. Its airframe was robust, and it had reliable onboard systems. In addition to the AT-28 Trojans, the propeller-driven, rugged, and reliable Douglas A-1 Sky Raiders pounded the communist forces and supply routes. These aircraft came into their own in Southeast Asia, where their heavy ordnance loads, long loiter times, and high maneuverability at low altitudes made them more effective than the fast movers of the more modern jet air force. This hodgepodge of an air force, with its peculiar mix of aircraft and air crews, flew for 8 years in the crowded skies over Laos.
We stopped a lot of traffic, and in their post-war history, the North is candid about the disruption we caused. But we didn't stop at all. Enough got through to, more than enough, got through to support the forces they had in South Vietnam. We extracted a very, very big price for it, but we never stopped the traffic. And it's something I really regret to this day, because I was a squadron commander there of the Misty Squadron for a period. It was my job to stop those trucks coming down that road, and I never did it.
The American so-called civilian pilots program was phased out in 1966, and Detachment 6 was absorbed by the 606th Air Commando Squadron in the same year. The air program did, however, create the world's only guerrilla army with air superiority.